You're listening to Audiology. Support our work on Patreon and be sure to submit your requests for topics in the comments below. On October 12, 2000, Al-Qaeda carried out a suicide bombing attack on the USS Cole, which is a guided missile destroyer serving in the United States Navy. This tragic incident took place as the ship was refueling in the harbor of Aden in Yemen. The attack marked the most lethal event for the U.S. Navy since 1987, claiming the lives of 17 sailors and injuring 37 others. Al-Qaeda later took credit for the violent strike against the U.S. A judge in the United States held the nation of Sudan accountable for the bombing. As a result, over $13 million was released from Sudanese frozen assets to compensate the family members of those who died in the attack. This incident led the United States Navy to reconsider and change its rules of engagement. To address the aftermath more formally, Sudan and the United States came to an agreement on October 30, 2020. They signed a deal to provide compensation to the families of the sailors who perished in the USS Cole bombing. This agreement officially came into effect in February 2021. On October 12, 2000, a U.S. Navy destroyer called the USS Cole was carrying out a standard refueling stop in the harbor of Aden, led by Commander Kirk Lippold. By 9:30 in the morning, the ship was docked, and refueling began an hour later. At approximately 11:18 a.m. local time, a small boat loaded with explosives and 2 suicide bombers approached the ship's side and detonated a massive explosion. This blast created a large hole, as detailed on a memorial for those who tragically lost their lives in the incident. Robert Fink, a former CIA intelligence officer, shared that the explosion appeared to be caused by C4 explosives shaped to damage the boat's hull. The attack was powerful, using over 1,000 pounds of explosives. As a result, significant damage occurred beneath the deck where many crew members were gathering for lunch, leading to their deaths. Despite the extensive damage, the ship's crew managed to prevent further flooding in critical areas after 3 long days. Divers confirmed upon inspection that the ship's main structural beam was not damaged. Those wounded in this attack were initially treated at the Landstuhl Regional Medical Center, a U.S. Army hospital in Germany near Ramstein, before being transported back home to the United States. This event marked the most severe attack on a U.S. naval vessel since 1987, when the Iraqi Air Force struck the USS Stark. The terrorist group Al-Qaeda orchestrated this act of asymmetric warfare. In 2001, Al-Qaeda released a video featuring Osama bin Laden, where he praised the attack and called for similar actions. It's important to mention that this was not Al-Qaeda's first attempt to target a U.S. Navy destroyer. Earlier that same year, they tried to attack the USS the Sullivans with an overloaded boat filled with explosives, but it sank before the plan could be executed. This attack was part of what's known as the 2000 Millennium Attack Plots. After this failed endeavor, Al-Qaeda members, including a future September 11th hijacker named Khalid al-Mihdhar, reviewed their plans in Malaysia. Mihdhar later traveled to California. On June 10, 2000, he left the United States for Yemen to visit his wife, but also continued his involvement with Al-Qaeda there. The Yemeni Prime Minister at the time, Abdul Karim al-Iriani, identified Mihdhar as a significant planner of the USS Cole attack. Mihdhar eventually returned to America and participated in the infamous September 11th terrorist attacks, where he was one of the hijackers of American Airlines Flight 77, which crashed into the Pentagon, claiming 184 lives. When the USS Cole was in trouble, the first ship to come to its aid was the HMS Marlborough. This Royal Navy Type 23 frigate, led by Captain Anthony Ricks, was on her way back to the United Kingdom after 6 months in the Persian Gulf. Equipped with medical and damage control experts, the Marlborough changed course for Aden as soon as her help was accepted. The worst injured sailors were medically evacuated by the French Air Force to a military hospital in Djibouti. They underwent surgery there before being transferred to Germany. The initial response from the U.S. military saw a quick reaction force from the U.S. Air Force's 363rd Expeditionary Security Forces Squadron fly in on a C-130 from Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. After that, a team of U.S. Marines on a P-3 Orion joined them from Bahrain. Hours after the attack, these groups were bolstered by a platoon of U.S. Marines from Virginia who formed part of the 1st Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team. Later that same day, the USS Donald Cook and USS Hawes arrived as fast as they could to provide repair and support. Following a few days, a range of ships and services, the USNS Catawba, USS Camden, Anchorage, Duluth, and Tarawa, all arrived. They helped with everything from standing watch and securing the harbor to offering food and a place to stay for the USS Cole crew. Landing crafts from the assault ships made sure hot meals and supplies were delivered daily, and they assisted in moving people between the supporting ships. During the following days, landing craft LCU 1632 and crew from LCU 1666 were on patrol duty around the USS Cole. In 1988, the USS Samuel B. Roberts was the first to be transported in an innovative way, and the USS Cole followed suit. The Cole was taken from Aden on the MV Blue Marlin, a Dutch semi-submersible ship designed for heavy lifting and salvage. On December 13, 2000, the Cole arrived in Pascagoula, Mississippi to undergo reconstruction. When Federal Bureau of Investigation and Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents went to Yemen to investigate the bombing, they faced a very difficult situation. Upon arrival, they were greeted by Yemeni Special Forces soldiers, each with an AK-47 aimed at them. During this time, calls for a holy war against America by Yemeni parliament members were a regular feature on the evening news. The Yemen authorities eventually handed over security camera footage from the port, but the key moment of the explosion was suspiciously missing. The constant feeling of threat was so intense that the agents would sleep fully clothed, weapons within reach. At one stage, when their hotel was encircled by armed men in traditional clothing, some in jeeps, the agents decided to relocate to a U.S. Navy ship for safety. Even then, they didn't feel entirely secure. When they finally received permission from the Yemen government to return to shore, an agent reported that their helicopter had to make abrupt maneuvers during the flight, as there was a concern about being targeted by shoulder-fired missiles. On March 14, 2007, U.S. Federal Judge Robert G. Dumar found the government of Sudan responsible for a bombing, based on a lawsuit from relatives of the victims. The relatives argued that Sudan's support was crucial for al-Qaeda's ability to conduct the attack. Judge Dumar noted the presence of ample evidence as proven by expert testimonies, showing Sudan's government's role in inciting the bombing due to its prior actions. Subsequent to this decision, on July 25, 2007, Judge Dumar ordered Sudan to compensate with $8 million to the families of the 17 sailors who were killed, by multiplying their salaries by their potential working years. The next day, Sudan's Justice Minister Mohammed al-Mard announced plans to appeal. Years later, in March 2015, another U.S. federal judge, Rudolph Contreras, held both Iran and Sudan accountable for the 2000 USS Cole bombing by al-Qaeda. He claimed that Iran helped al-Qaeda set up in Yemen and provided training and logistical support through Hezbollah. Earlier, two other federal judges had confirmed Sudan's liability, but Contreras' decision was the first to implicate Iran. By May 2008, every individual previously convicted in connection to the attack had either escaped from prison or was released by Yemeni authorities. On June 30, 2008, Brigadier General Thomas W. Hartman, a legal advisor to the U.S. military tribunal system, announced the indictment of Abd al-Rahim al-Nashiri, accused of orchestrating the bombing, and detained in Guantanamo Bay since 2006. Although Pentagon officials pushed for the death penalty, the charges required approval by a Defense Department official in charge of military commissions for suspects of terrorism. The mastermind behind the Cole bombing has been a subject of debate, with several individuals associated with the title. Abd al-Rahim al-Nashiri is identified as the planner by a Guantanamo military commission. Captured in 2002, al-Nashiri faced waterboarding and other harsh interrogation methods the former President George W. Bush's administration admitted to using. Similarly labeled as a mastermind was Abu Ali al-Harithi, one of the first presumed terrorists to be hit by a Predator drone missile. In 2003, the last two major conspirators still at large, Jamal Ahmad Mohammed al-Badawi and Fahd al-Qusso, were indicted by the U.S. Justice Department. Al-Badawi, also deemed a mastermind, escaped from a Yemeni jail in 2006 through a tunnel, but was killed by a drone strike on January 1, 2019. Tawfiq bin Attash, another person considered the mastermind and detained in Guantanamo Bay, was captured in Pakistan in 2003. An al-Qaeda leader in Yemen also confirmed the death of co-conspirator Abdul Munim Salim al-Fatahani by a U.S. drone on January 31, 2012. Lastly, on May 6, 2012, It was reported and later confirmed that Fahd al-Qusso was killed in a drone strike in southern Yemen, with both Yemeni and U.S. officials verifying the event, along with al-Qaeda's media network As-Sahab. The Pentagon's rules for the destroyer's crew meant that they could not shoot at the approaching small boat, which they did not know was carrying explosives unless they received permission from the captain or another officer. Petty Officer John Washak recalled that, after the explosion and with blood on his face, a senior officer directed him not to aim his machine gun at another small boat nearing them, reinforcing the rules: do not fire unless fired upon first. He felt like the military was training them to second-guess themselves, suggesting that shooting preemptively could have led to a court-martial. Petty Officer Jennifer Kudrick mentioned that they would have faced more consequences for shooting 2 people from the boat than for the loss of 17 of their own. President Bill Clinton condemned the attack as cowardly terrorism and vowed to hold those responsible accountable. The official investigation, reported on January 19, 2001, found that the commanding officer, Commander Kirk Lippold, acted appropriately based on what he knew. However, Lippold was denied promotion and retired as commander. The attack meant glory for Osama bin Laden. His training camps swelled with new recruits and cash from contributors. Both President Clinton and his successor, George W. Bush, faced scrutiny for not striking back militarily after the Cole attack before September 11, 2001. The 9/11 Commission report hinted that bin Laden was frustrated at the lack of a U.S. response, which might have led to plans for a larger attack. At first, it wasn't clear that al-Qaeda was behind the Cole bombing. Even as late as March 2001, intelligence was still inconclusive. Condoleezza Rice, the National Security Advisor, said details were hazy when they came into office, but Vice President Dick Cheney received a report attributing responsibility to bin Laden soon after. Former CIA Director George Tenet stated the evidence he shared early on didn't change much before 9/11. The Bush administration chose not to swat flies with a one-off military response and instead began developing a broader strategy to eliminate al-Qaeda. In response to the bombing, the Navy enhanced its anti-terrorism measures, establishing an Anti-Terrorism and Force Protection Center to improve tactics, equipment, and training. The Navy also unified its anti-terrorism forces under one command to enhance the protection of its assets. In 2002, a CIA drone strike in Yemen eliminated one of the bombing's planners, Abu Ali al-Harithi, along with others, including a U.S. citizen. 2 perpetrators were sentenced to death by Yemen in 2004, but escape, surrender, and capture marked the following years for those involved. In 2008, the U.S. charged Abd al-Rahim al-Nashiri, believed to be the mastermind, with the intent to seek the death penalty. The U.S. legal system saw multiple lawsuits against Sudan, as it was found to have assisted in facilitating the attack. One decision awarded millions to the families of the sailors killed. Another case led to a legal battle reaching the Supreme Court over the technicalities of delivering lawsuit paperwork. However, in 2019, the Supreme Court overturned previous decisions impacting compensation awards. Jamal al-Badawi, an al-Qaeda militant involved in the bombing, was confirmed killed by a U.S. airstrike in 2019. The Navy incorporated the bombing experience into its damage control training for recruits, simulating real-life scenarios similar to the Cole attack to better prepare them for future incidents. Sudan, seeking to rebuild its international relationships, agreed in February 2020 to compensate the victims' families as part of a settlement involving historical claims, although it did not admit to culpability for the bombing. This compensation was a step toward Sudan's removal from the state sponsors of terrorism list. In October 2020, Sudan signed an agreement to pay $335 million to the families affected by the USS Cole attack and the 1998 U.S. Embassy bombings. On October 12, 2001, a moving tribute was unveiled at the Norfolk Naval Station in Virginia, honoring the victims of a tragic attack. This memorial holds a special place along the shores of Willoughby Bay and gazes out over the channel where Navy ships embark on their journeys to the open ocean. The memorial features 17 modest markers that poignantly reflect the young ages of the sailors who lost their lives too soon. Additionally, 3 imposing granite structures, each adorned with brass plaques, symbolize the red, white, and blue of the American flag. Surrounding these, a circle of brown markers represents the overwhelming sorrow and darkness that engulfed the ship. To further honor those who were lost, 28 black pine trees have been planted. They stand for the 17 fallen sailors and the 11 children they left behind. This heartfelt memorial was made possible through donations from countless individuals and businesses, all orchestrated by the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society. This organization also presented the memorial to the Navy. The idea for the memorial was initially conceived by members of the USS Cole's crew. These individuals collaborated with Navy architects and the Society to bring their shared vision to life. Positioned about 500 feet to the west of the memorial for the USS Iowa turret explosion, which is also on the Naval Station grounds, the USS Cole Memorial stands as a somber reminder of sacrifice. A separate marker can be found in Wisconsin Square in Norfolk, situated close to the USS Wisconsin, further honoring the memory of those we lost.